All right, let's dive into one of history's most legendary prison breaks, the 1962 escape from Alcatraz. This is a story of just mind-blowing ingenuity, and it leaves us with one massive question. Did they actually get away with it?
Okay, so picture this. It's the morning of June 12th, 1962. Inside the walls of what was supposed to be the most inescapable prison on Earth, a discovery is about to be made that will kick off a mystery that people are still talking about today. 3 inmates are gone, just vanished.
So how did this all kick off? Well, it wasn't some big, dramatic showdown. It all started with a simple, routine morning head count. A day that began just like any other on The Rock was about to become the stuff of legend.
When the morning guards went to check on Frank Morris and the brothers John and Clarence Anglin, they saw what they thought were sleeping inmates. But they weren't. Tucked into the beds were these incredibly realistic dummy heads, a brilliant trick that had completely fooled the guards making their rounds all night long.
And we're not talking about some sloppy, last-minute job here. These things were masterpieces of deception. They were made from plaster, painted to look like real skin, and topped with actual human hair they'd been collecting from the prison barber shop. The story goes that one guard got suspicious, gave one of the heads a shove, and it just rolled right onto the floor, breaking its plaster nose. Can you imagine that moment?
Now, to really get how insane this escape was, you have to understand what Alcatraz was. People called it the Rock for a reason. When it was refortified in 1934, it was designed to be the end of the line, a fortress. It was stuck out in the middle of the San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing, churning water. The whole point of it was to be absolutely 100% inescapable. And look, the odds were just completely stacked against you. This place held the worst of the worst, guys like Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. You had tougher iron bars, guards watching your every move from towers, and get this, a dozen prisoner checks every single day. In its entire run as a federal prison, 36 men tried to escape, and pretty much all of them were either caught or died trying.
So, who were these guys? Who could possibly be smart enough, or maybe crazy enough, to even try something like this? Let's meet the masterminds and break down exactly how they plan to do the impossible.
So the crew was made up of 3 guys who already knew and trusted each other from their time in other prisons, which was key. The leader was Frank Morris. This guy was reportedly a genius, the brains of the whole operation, with a history of escape attempts. He was joined by 2 brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, who provided the muscle and the teamwork to pull it off.
Their whole plan, when you break it down, was just brilliant. It really came down to 4 major steps. First, dig out of their cells. Second, get into a utility corridor that nobody ever guarded. Third, build their escape gear in a secret spot. And finally, the grand finale, get out through the roof. Simple, right?
Now, that secret workshop, it was an unused space right on top of their own cell block. It was the perfect hiding spot. And up there, night after night, they pieced together everything they'd need, including a raft and life vests made out of more than 50 raincoats that they had managed to steal over time.
And this is where their ingenuity just goes completely off the charts. The tools they built were something else. They made a drill out of a busted vacuum cleaner motor, used old saw blades to slowly chip away at the concrete walls, and even made a little periscope so they could watch the guards without being seen. They even turned a concertina, a small accordion-like instrument, into a pump to inflate the raft. It's just incredible.
So you've got a pile of raincoats. How in the world do you turn that into a raft that's not going to sink in the middle of the bay? Well, the answer is a process called vulcanization. They actually read about it in magazines. They realized they could use the prison's own steam pipes to press the seams of the raincoats together using the heat to create a waterproof seal. Absolutely genius.
Okay, so the plan is solid. The gear is built. Everything they've been working on for months all comes down to this one night, the moment of truth.
So on the night of June 11th, it's go time. They slip out of their cells, leaving the dummy heads behind. Now, there was a 4th guy, Alan West, but he couldn't get his vent open in time and got left behind. The other 3 made it up to the roof, slid down a giant smokestack, got over a fence, and then, under the cover of total darkness, they launched their raft into the bay.
The next morning, of course, the alarm goes up. The men are gone. And what kicks off next is one of the biggest manhunts ever and the start of a mystery that is still unsolved more than 60 years later.
The search of the bay turned up not a whole lot. They found one of the paddles they'd made, a few bits of rubber, and a waterproofed packet of letters. Maybe the biggest clue was a homemade life vest that washed up on a beach nearby. But of the men themselves, not a trace, nothing.
And this, right here, is the million-dollar question. After all that work, all that incredible planning, could they have actually survived the most dangerous part of the whole plan, the San Francisco Bay itself?
You know, you can really argue this both ways, and people have for decades. On the one hand, the FBI was convinced they'd drowned. The water's freezing, the currents are brutal, and none of their follow-up plans on the mainland ever happened. But then you've got the other side. These guys planned everything so perfectly. And the biggest point of all? No bodies. Not one was ever found.
Finally, after 17 years of hitting dead ends, the FBI officially closed their case on the last day of 1979. They concluded the men had to have drowned in the bay. Case closed.
But that's not quite the end of the story. The case was then handed over to the US Marshals Service, and they still, to this day, keep the file open. They still follow up on credible tips, just in case, just in the unlikely event these guys are still out there somewhere.
So that's where we're left. Was this just a story of 3 men who got beat by Mother Nature at the last second? Or is this the story of the one perfect escape? The one that actually worked, leaving 3 ghosts who managed to vanish into the night and pull off the impossible. To this day, nobody knows for sure.